Hello and welcome to Live from the Eagle's Nest. We're looking at a live shot of the big bald eagle's nest here at the National Conservation Training Center near Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I'm Randy Robinson, hosting today and joined by Megan Burdi here beside me. And we've got a couple of great guests with us today talking about wildlife rehabilitation. In a little bit, I'll be talking with Katie Fallon from the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia. And then Megan's going to be talking with Jessica Andersen with the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center, both wildlife rehab facilities not too far from here, one in Virginia and the other in West Virginia. But before we get into all that, I want to say hello and welcome to everybody. All of our new viewers and our old friends who've been with us for a long time. This nest has been here for over 21 years, and Rob's got a little video we'll play to give you an idea of what the Potomac River looks like nearby here. This is a drone video that we shot. There's a couple islands below the nest, and that's the whole reason the bald eagles are here. Bald eagles love to be near water. Especially when they're raising their young, they want to be on a river or a lake. So this is the Potomac. We're actually looking at the Maryland side of the river. We're right on the border between West Virginia and Maryland, close to the little college town of Shepherdstown, West Virginia. But the National Conservation Training Center is the main training facility for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on about 500 acres to the right side as you're seeing this video, in West Virginia, near Shepherdstown. But this is perfect habitat. It's the home of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but for the last 21 years, it's been home to this pair of nesting bald eagles that people call Bella and Scout. And it's been an interesting season, to say the least. I'll catch up for those that are just joining us new for the first time. Before I get into that, I want to say thanks to everybody joining us today, especially to the Outdoor Channel for hosting and streaming of the live nest views, to the Friends of NCTC who have sponsored the Eagle Cam for 21 years now, to Bald Eagles 101 and Deb and Paul and everybody there that are observing the nest all the time, the Eaglet Monsters, Judy down in Florida, and all of our nest observers and folks in the chat room who are always observing what's going on and posting. So welcome to our old friends and our new friends alike. And as I mentioned, our topic today will be bird and wildlife rehabilitation, taking care of orphaned and injured wildlife. And go ahead and send your questions in anytime to the YouTube live chat room. And young Eagle One is in there. Hello, these are always great. Thanks for joining us. And go ahead and put any questions in for our guests or us as well. So we wanted to update a little bit about what's going on at the nest here. Now, some of you have been watching, heard some commotion. You can't see what's going on the camera. One of our cameras is down. And we, interestingly enough, we had some ants get into our control equipment in the last week or so. And actually were enough of them in there that they destroyed one of the switches. So we've just got, our camera 1 has been down for over a week. Camera 2 is still up, but tomorrow or the next day, we're going to be taking both cameras off to repair that damage and to put a whole new control panel in that will be hopefully a little bit more ant-proof. And so I'll post a note in the chat about that as we get a little bit closer. But about a few years ago, we put a nest platform in. I shouldn't say a nest platform, but a platform, a man-made platform about 30 feet below the nest. In the event that this nest should fail or fall or the main limb that holds it breaks, we wanted to give the eagles sort of a starter home, so to speak. So we put just a few logs, small logs, and crossed them into a big to a big crotch in the tree below the nest. Now it's not visible on either camera here, and it's really not visible on our field cam, but if you hear noises going on, these microphones on the cameras are pretty sensitive. You may have heard the adults bringing sticks in. So they've started a little nest there, but there's not much of a nest. I don't think they're really too serious about it. But normally this would be the busy time of the year for this nest, being the middle of almost the end of May here. Normally the young ones would be ready to fledge in a couple of weeks. But if you've been on the camera, you know that we lost our young ones shortly after hatching. Unfortunately, the male, adult male, killed both of the young ones the day they hatched. And that's a very strange behavior that we hadn't seen before. And Blue Hawk put a question in into the chat room on the main Eagle Cam, asking if could that have been due to lead poisoning. And he mentioned, he put a photograph in there of a bald eagle out in Iowa that has had its head hanging down, and we noted that Scout, our resident male, had been doing that to some degree. So it's a good question, Blue Hawk. We can't say for sure, but you know, a number of people had noted that Scout had been hanging his head down, kind of looking at his feet. That was a noted behavior. And he did have other strange behaviors, including ultimately killing the two young ones, unfortunately, back in early April. Well, we can't say, we may never know if it was lead poisoning or not, but it could have been related to if it wasn't lead, it could have been another pollutant in his system. We just don't know that. At any rate, we'll get back into that in a little bit. But I wanted to mention, if you've heard something going on, wing flapping or sticks being brought in, and you can't see it on the main nest cam, that's what's going on just down below the nest, about 30 feet. They brought in a few sticks. They sort of made a little bit of a start on the nest, but like I said, I don't think they were too serious about it. I think it's more that they're just used to being very active this time of the year, and with no young ones in there, they just sort of started building a nest that we can't see. And of course, if something did happen to this nest, then we'd have to move the cameras down, but there's no point in doing that yet. But as I mentioned, we will have the cam shut down. I'll put a note into the chat rooms in a little bit. Now, some of you might have seen on the chat room about the nest out in Iowa. There was a nest with 3 young birds in it. Denton Holmes runs that cam out there. And the nest blew out in a big storm. The entire nest got blown over. And fortunately, the young ones, 3 of them, were rescued. And the Denton Holmes crew and some volunteers very quickly built a nest on the ground, about 10 feet off the ground. They put the young ones back into the nest, but the young ones weren't getting fed, so the local rehabbers and the rescuers took those young birds out, and they took them into rehab, and they're going to raise them and make sure they're fed properly, because they're still growing, and then they'll release them. So that was a good news story. Fortunately, even though they fell about 80 feet, they didn't get hurt. No serious injuries at any rate. Now, we do have a couple of videos. Rob, if you want to bring those up, of interest over the last couple of weeks here. Deb Steck posted these videos. Now, the first one is, let's see, what do we have coming up? Oh, here we go. This is a young video. This is a young bird, young eagle, back in May. This guy is maybe about a year old, came into the nest and was looking around. Since we don't have any adults in here raising young, we've had a few visitors, including this one. It's a young adult, Now we know from the coloration this bird's probably a year, maybe a little over a year old. You can see it's when they first fledge from the nest, they're totally dark and they don't have any white on at all. But then over the next 4 to 5 years they change color, and this one appears to be about a year old. Could even have been our young one from last year. We just don't know. We don't band them. We have no way to identify them. But he or she came in and was looking around. Now normally if the adults were in here and they were raising young, they would chase off a young bird like this. But you know, being that they're not raising young ones right now, they're a lot more tolerant of birds around here. So this bird was probably looking for something to eat, thought it might find some fish in here. So Rob, if you want to go to the next video, it was even moving some sticks around. The next video from Deb Steck is a lightning storm back on May 11th. And we've had some pretty severe storms here. Luckily the nest has been holding up well, even in the high winds that we've had. It's a strong nest. It's 100 feet up, almost off the ground. You can see some lightning coming in. Yeah, pretty nasty storms in the last couple of weeks. A couple of them have knocked out power to our cam, so usually takes us a day or two to get things back on there. And then our last video, if you want to bring that up, Rob, it was just a couple days ago. Here's a great blue heron. Great blue heron coming in to check things out. Actually, the second time it came in, this was just a few days ago. It was in earlier in the month, and Deb posted this video to YouTube. We've got a lot of great blue heron on the river, on the Potomac, and you can see those long skinny legs made for wading. And the blue heron, probably just curious, maybe looking for a meal up here, thought it might find a leftover of something in the nest. But the nest here at NCTC is only about a quarter of a mile away from the Potomac River, so there's a lot of great blue herons. If you were out on a canoe or a kayak and you went down the river, chances are pretty good you'd see a great blue heron. Usually they're along the shoreline, just standing very still, waiting for an unsuspecting fish or a frog or something to move by. And that's how they hunt and earn their living on the Potomac River. So thanks for sending those in, Deb, and thanks for bringing that up. Rob, just wanted to give you a little bit of update on what's going on at the nest. We've seen intermittently, maybe once a day or so, Bella, the female, come in. We thought we saw a scout this morning. Yesterday there was another bird in there. We're not sure if it was Scout. It looked like he had a little bit more black on his head than Scout has. Scout has just a little bit of black on the back of his head. That's why we know he's roughly about 4.5 years old. But the bird we saw yesterday had a little bit more, so we're not quite sure if that was Scout or a different male. Sometimes it's hard to tell. So Morris is asking, is anyone having problems with the audio? Okay, Morris, thanks for letting us know. I think our audio is good on this end. Are you monitoring it in there, Rob? Do you hear any problems with audio? Uh-oh. So we've got another person that said yes, no audio. So Rob, if you would check that out, make sure we're sending out audio, and give you a minute here before I introduce Katie Fallon, our first guest. Anybody else out there having trouble?
It should be working now.
Okay. Okay, hopefully, okay, good. Thank you, Brittany. Brittany says she can hear now. So, okay, very good. Well, sorry about the audio issue, folks. I guess you didn't hear anything that I said, but that's okay. We're just doing a few updates on the nest. Basically, I just mentioned that we've had a few visitors. A couple of young eagles have come into the nest in the.
Post the correct version after.
Okay, yeah. Rob will post the corrected version with the audio on it. If you missed the first 5 minutes or so, we were talking about. Let's see. Is there? Brittany's mentioning. Is there a echo? Okay, Brittany, you might have two versions open. Sometimes if you have two versions of YouTube or live stream open, you'll get an echo. So check to see, shut one of those down and that echo should go away. That might be where you're getting the echo from. At any rate, we've had a couple of visitors, a great blue heron, and you might have saw that video, and a young eagle in there. Our resident adults have been in and out a little bit. Usually best time to see them is morning or evening. So we will post the corrected version of our program here in a little bit. Okay, good. That took care of it. Thanks, Brittany. Okay, so let me go ahead and introduce our first guest. We're going to be talking about wildlife rehabilitation today. Katie Fallon is the executive director of the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia, located near Morgantown, West Virginia, near Cheat Lake. Katie's an educator, writer, and certified professional bird trainer. She writes the column Wingbeats for Birdwatchers Digest and is the author of the nonfiction books Vulture in 2020 and Cerulean Blues, published back in 2011. And she's written 2 books for children. Since the mid-90s, Katie has trained a wide variety of raptors, parrots, and corvids. So Katie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Randy. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
And tell us a little bit about why you, and I should mention your husband, Jesse is a veterinarian there at the Cheat Lake Animal Hospital, but why did you form the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia?
Well, we got started back in 2012, and we saw a need for a rehabilitator in West Virginia who would take in all species of birds and try to fix them and get them back to health. We really only have, as far as I know, 2 rehab centers in the state that will take care of songbirds, water birds, in addition to raptors and eagles. So we kind of felt like a crazy thing at the time to start a nonprofit organization and get going with it. But it's been growing every year, and it's been successful, and we have a great time working on it.
And tell us a little bit about what ACCA does overall, and what kind of birds that you get in there in general.
Sure. Well, we only do birds, so we don't do any mammals or reptiles or amphibians. We are just an avian rehab center. Our mission is to conserve the region's wild birds through research, education, and rehabilitation. The thing that we probably spend the most time doing on a day-to-day basis, especially this time of year, is the rehab portion. We are in the midst of busy baby bird season right now. Annually, we admit between 500 and 600 injured or displaced wild birds, usually from about 60 different species. All the birds come through our veterinary hospital. When they're first admitted, we get birds from the public, from the West Virginia DNR, from law enforcement, and really anybody who finds an injured wild bird can bring it to the veterinarian we work with, Cheat Lake Animal Hospital, and they are open 24 hours a day. So it's really convenient for folks to drop off the injured wild birds, and there's no charge. And we have a small building on that property where we work to rehab the birds that we can. The most common species that we get is not the bald eagle, of course. We get a lot of American robins. Right now we have quite a few injured fledgling robins. We also get a lot of red-tailed hawks, a lot of eastern screech owls, barred owls, northern cardinals, blue jays, and a handful of eagles every year, and a handful of great blue herons. We just had a great blue heron admitted. So a little bit of everything as far as birds go.
Well, it's a great service, and you're right. I know. I'm very glad that you started the Avian Conservation Center there. We, as you mentioned, we've got another bird rehabilitation facility, but it's all the way in the southern part of the state. 5 hours to the south, down along New River Gorge National Park in that area, called Three Rivers Avian Center, and they do great work. And then I mean NCTC over here in the Eastern Panhandle, our closest facility is actually in Virginia. It's the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center, and we're going to meet, Megan will be talking with Jessica there in just a little bit. But I want to go ahead and encourage people to send in any questions. And we do have one from Brittany here, Katie. Question for Katie: do you have any opportunities for homeschooled children? Also, are there any volunteer opportunities with ACCA?
That's a great question. The answer is yes for both of those. We have an outdoor classroom here in the Cheat Lake area where Randy has been there. It's about a mile from where we do our rehabilitation work, and our outdoor classroom is a covered pavilion, and it's where our 20 non-releasable birds live. The birds that we are licensed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to possess for education. And we do field trips, and we do guided tours of that facility. And we have some small summer camps coming up. So we will be posting on our social media when we have those open tour days. We can also do a private tour. If you send me an email, we can get it scheduled. There's somebody there every day, but it's not always the same time every day. And as far as volunteer opportunities go, we have about 40 volunteers, and it fluctuates a little bit seasonally. Right now we have our regular volunteers, and we have about 13 interns who are mostly West Virginia University students, but folks from a few other universities also working with us this summer to get some hands-on experience. We have usually 3 part-time staff members, so we're not a huge organization as far as personnel. Volunteers do a lot of the work for us, the cleaning the bird enclosures. If you've ever taken care of birds or any animal, really, they go to the bathroom a lot, and they have to eat at least daily for some species, but baby songbirds have to eat sometimes every half hour from sunrise to sunset, and most of that work is done by volunteers. Our volunteers are, again, a lot of West Virginia University students because we are in the Morgantown area. We also have retired folks, school teachers, doctors, everybody, a little bit of, again, everybody. Our volunteer opportunities are open for anyone who's interested and is not squeamish about cutting up dead mice, which is kind of a requirement for feeding a lot of the birds in our care. And, live mealworms and superworms, which are sometimes even a little bit worse to handle than the dead mice.
Now, you mentioned that you have a outdoor pavilion. It's a very nice facility, and you have your aviary there. Talk to us a little bit about your ambassador birds that you use for education outreach.
Sure. Yes, I mentioned we have about 20 non-releasable birds, and these are all birds that were not going to be able to thrive in the wild. we have them for different reasons. Some have vision problems or impaired flight, and some were raised by humans and unintentionally become too accustomed with humans to release back to the wild. And some larger birds, like we have a barred owl, who's one of everybody's favorite bird. Loves to see this human imprinted barred owl, who's very social and very interactive, but he would be very dangerous to release back to the wild. He would continue to seek out humans for companionship and for food, and he would land on someone's head probably, and would injure himself or humans, so can't be released. We do have 2 bald eagles in our care that people can come visit. One is named Seneca. She's from the Seneca Rocks area of West Virginia, South Branch of the Potomac. And we have an eagle named Potomac, or Mac for short. We call him Mac, who was found along the North Branch of the Potomac. And Mac is a flight impaired bald eagle. We are not entirely sure what caused his injury. He had a fracture of his radius and puncture wounds around it. And our theory is that he maybe got in a territorial dispute with another bald eagle and lost. And then Seneca is a younger eagle. She was hatched in 2018, and she still has a little bit of brownish black on her beak and a couple tiny brown flecks in her white head, but she's almost got that pure white head and white tail that adults have. And she has vision impairment. We're not entirely sure if that impaired vision was caused by lead toxicity as a young bird, or exposure to West Nile virus, which can also cause some vision problems, or trauma. So we're not sure initially what happened to this bird, but she can't see well enough to go back to the wild. But we spend a lot of time working with our non-releasable birds. We try to give them the best lives possible while they're stuck with us, living under human care. We train our birds using all of the least intrusive methods that we can. We use positive reinforcement to try to change behavior, or to get the birds to do the kind of behaviors that we want to see, whether that's standing on a glove, which is really unnatural for a wild raptor, or going into a carrier, also very unnatural. Standing in front of a room full of third graders, which is terrifying, for humans as well as birds. So we try to make all those experiences really possible by giving the bird a reward that they want while they're having those experiences. So we train with food rewards for everything we want the birds to do.
So, Katie, we have a little video from ACCA. Rob, if you could pull that video up, let's take a look. What's going on here, Katie?
This is carrier cam. This is Mac, the bald eagle, working on getting more comfortable with his carrier. So the goal is for Mac to come into the carrier and stay there.
Good job, buddy.
And this video is from a little while ago, and he's more comfortable with it now. But this just kind of shows and he's coming back for some more. This shows some of the process that we go through. We have a bird trainer, her name is Cheyenne.
That was so good.
Giving him little bits of food in the carrier, and she's giving him some verbal encouragement too. And we want that bird to be able to go right into the carrier and have only positive experiences in that carrier. So you saw the little pieces of food that Mac was grabbing when he went in the carrier. He loves fish, but he also loves pieces of rabbit. And he thinks that, rats are okay, but he would really prefer fish and rabbit.
So you train a lot of different birds. How would you say bald eagles are in the spectrum of bird training? Are they quick learners or difficult, or what do you think?
Well, in my unpopular opinion, maybe is that they are not my favorite birds to try to work with. They're very large, which makes it difficult sometimes to work with them. They also tend to be, at least our eagles, are a little higher energy than some of our birds. Like we have a couple red-tailed hawks, a peregrine falcon, a couple kites, also high energy birds, but at least in my experience, those species are all easier for me to work with anyway than our eagles. So they also tend to, fish is not as much fun to cut in tiny pieces and handle as mice are. Not that cutting up mice is fun, but fish can be sort of a little bit less pleasant to work with.
And Katie had a question here. Would a bald eagle ever live far away from a body of water?
I would suspect in some parts of their range, maybe if there were other food sources available. I'm trying to think of an instance where I saw a bald eagle away from water. I can't think of any bald eagles that I've seen that have been too far away from water, although perhaps in some parts of their range, if there was a food source available that wasn't fish, they might live away from water. I mean, bald eagles do scavenge a lot, eat a lot of carrion, as well as fish. But the bald eagles that we have, at least here in the Morgantown area, the nests that I know of are all very close to rivers and lakes.
Yeah, fish is definitely their favorite food for feeding the young, and they like to be along lakes and rivers. Golden eagles are different. Golden eagles would be out in arid areas, but usually you see bald eagles around water. So Katie, what should folks know about bird rescue in general? Any tips for what to do if we find a orphaned or injured bird?
Yes. Well, first and foremost, don't be a bird napper with baby birds. It can be very tempting when you see, a young bird hopping around on the ground to want to rescue it, or to think that it needs help, or to assume that it's been abandoned by its parents. Birds go through a very important phase of life called fledging, when they first leave the nest. They can't fly very well. They're mostly feathered, but they still can't really fly. They hop around on the ground for a few days while their parents stay close, continue to support them with food. It's a really important time in the development of a young bird's life, and we want to leave fledglings alone whenever possible. If the fledgling is in danger, on a road or on a sidewalk, it's okay to carefully move the bird a few feet off the sidewalk, but it's important that those parent birds get to raise those fledglings so they will have the best chance at a normal life. If a fledgling is injured, that's when you want to try to get it to rehab. If it's been in the mouth of a cat or a dog, it probably needs to be checked out by a veterinarian. If it's bleeding, if it has, fly eggs or ants or ticks on it, those are cases where it can be checked out by a rehabber. But if there's a mostly feathered baby bird hopping around on the ground, resist the urge to grab it and just watch it from a distance. You'll probably be able to see the parents come and feed it. If you find a baby bird without feathers, mostly featherless, kind of naked baby bird, they look really weird, not very cute, on the ground, you can look up and there will likely be a nest very close. And if that baby is not injured, you can pick it up and put it back in that nest. The parent birds won't reject a baby just because a human has touched it. It's really hard to raise baby songbirds. It's very time intensive. And I feel like we always struggle to get the nutrition exactly right for some of these species. So those parent birds know exactly what to feed those babies, and they can just do a much better job than we can.
Well, thanks, Katie. And tell us a little bit about your Young Birders Club before we wrap up here.
Oh, certainly. So we are, the ACCA is the sponsor of West Virginia Young Birders Club, which is a very informal group of kids who mostly go on walks and look for birds. We lead some bird walks at several locations in the Morgantown area. We would love to grow to other parts of the state too, and we were trying to do that before COVID happened, and then we kind of had some setbacks. But we do a lot of guided walks around Morgantown for kids, and we also do a Christmas bird count with our local Mountaineer chapter of the National Audubon Society. Our team, we have a kids team in the Christmas bird count, and we have a birding contest every year. We just had the 5th annual Morgantown Birding Cup, which is a 24-hour contest in which teams or families count as many different bird species as they can find in that 24-hour period. And then we get together at the end and we have some food, and we count up our species list and we declare winners, it's really fun. It's a great chance for families and friends to get out and try to see how many bird species they can in 24 hours. And we usually get, the winning teams usually get around 100 species, 90 species. So that's a lot of species to see in 24 hours around Morgantown.
That's tremendous. Rob, if you bring up the slide here with the web address on for the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia, it's accawv.org. And I want to mention that they are on June 22nd. They're going to be out at the outdoor classroom. If you're in the Cheat Lake or Morgantown area, southwestern Pennsylvania, check it out. It's going to be June 22nd. It's a fundraiser, a dinner out there, and you get to meet the Avian ambassadors there, and Katie and the staff as well. So that'll be a good time. So Katie, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for everything you do to help the birds out and taking care and rehabbing birds there at the Avian Conservation Center. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Randy, for having me, and thank you for all your work you do for eagles and other birds too.
Okay, well now I'm going to turn it over to Megan Burdi with me here in the studio, and Megan is going to introduce Jessica from the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center.
Thanks, Randy. I'm pleased to introduce Jessica Andersen, the Rehabilitation Manager at the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center, which is located in Boyce, Virginia, just a hop, skip, and a jump down the road from NCTC. She has worked at BRWC for 9 years, and before that worked a year at a wildlife rehabilitation facility and wildlife sanctuary in Texas, and completed an internship at the Marine Mammal Care Center in San Pedro, California, the year before that. Outside BRWC, she's a board member for the Wildlife Rescue League, a wildlife rehabilitation nonprofit organization in Northern Virginia. Aside from rehabilitation, Jessica is an avid birder, photographer, and is passionate about wildlife education and animal behavior. Jessica, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here with you guys.
So tell me a little bit about the work of the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center.
So we are a full-service nonprofit wildlife hospital that takes in and accepts all wildlife that is native to Virginia. So that could be foxes, that could be bald eagles, that could be white mice, basically anything that you're going to naturally find in Virginia, we take care of it, with the exception of white-tailed deer and black bears. We have an 8,000 square foot hospital facility where we have 2 full-time veterinarians on staff so that we can provide veterinary care for any animal that comes in that needs it. We can get x-rays, we can do surgery, we can do some diagnostics in-house, but otherwise we're doing both rehabilitation for anything that comes in, as well as education. We do have an education side to us where we have about 18 non-releasable ambassadors on site as well.
Awesome. And I just want to remind our audience, send us your questions anytime for Jessica, but I'm going to start off by asking, what is the most common species that you see at the center?
So number one is normally Eastern cottontails. At the end of every year, we kind of do a fun like top 5 of what we see. And normally it's cottontails at about 500 to 600 animals per year. Possums around 400 to 500, gray squirrels at 400, and then Eastern box turtles, and then American robins. So very similar to the Avian Conservation Center.
And do you have a favorite species to work with?
That's tough. I do really enjoy working with our songbirds, and especially our baby songbirds. It's very rewarding to watch a baby bird go from completely featherless to learning how to bathe for the first time and interacting with each other and picking up food on their own. But I also really enjoy raccoons. They're so smart. They're very interactive in terms of, providing enrichment, and they do need a longer rehabilitation time compared to most of our other species. So we tend to see their personalities come out a little bit more than with some of our shorter stay species.
Speaking of some of your species, Jessica sent us some great pictures from her work. Rob, I was wondering if we could bring up those slides so we can get a peek at the kind of species that are rehabbed at the center. And while you're getting that, what kind of trends are you seeing in wildlife injury?
So one general trend is every year we are generally increasing in the number of intakes that we see. So for example, last year we had a record-breaking year at over 3,600 animals, where the year previous to that was about 3,300, and the year previous to that was about 2,900. So every year we're seeing an increase in patients coming into our hospital, whether that is because there are more animals that are in need or just more people that are aware that there are now resources that they can take those animals to get the help that they need. So it could be a little bit of both. We're hoping it's the latter, where it's just people being more educated and being more understanding that these animals have somewhere to go when they need help. Something else we do see is in our raptors, primarily bald eagles, vultures, some of our other opportunistic and scavenging species, we are seeing high trends of lead poisoning. So generally about 80% or more of our adult eagles that come into care all have some levels of lead in their blood. And just so everybody is aware, there is no natural or safe level of lead to have in your body. So having any sort of presence in your body is going to impact their neurologic cognition, their ability to hunt and find food, potentially their ability to dodge cars when they're crossing roadways. So we do find that most of the traumatic injuries that these birds are coming in with are also coupled with lead poisoning as well.
So lead poisoning, what can the public do to prevent lead poisoning in our raptors, in our eagles, and in our wildlife species in general?
So in our area, lead poisoning is primarily caused from our scavenging raptors consuming carrion that has been shot with lead ammunition. So the best thing that people can do to help prevent this is hunters specifically, when they're going to hunt or utilize ammunition, is by using non-lead ammunition. And that does not include lead ammunition that is jacketed by another metal like copper. You want an ammunition that has no lead in it whatsoever, because lead is very soft. It does fragment very easily when it's used and when it hits into an animal or it hits bone. And the problem with that is most hunters are doing some wound dressing while they're out in the field. They're taking back meat that hopefully isn't impacted by the lead shot, but they may be leaving gut piles, and they may be leaving items that they don't want to take back, that they think that they've cut everything around, but there are still pieces in there. And it only takes lead the size of a grain of rice to kill an animal like a bald eagle. So just not using lead ammunition, is a really great way to help reduce how much lead is out there in the environment, because once it's out there, it is really hard to remove at that point.
Thanks for that, Jessica. And we've got your slides up now to see some awesome pictures of your work. What are we seeing in this picture here?
So this was one of our ambassadors, Jefferson. He was our Eagle ambassador. He has since passed away, unfortunately, but he was one of my favorite birds to work with. So while I was the rehab manager, we also had some overlap with our rehab in the education side, and animal behavior training has always been something that I have had a lot of interest and passion in. And Jefferson had always been kind of a very nervous bird. He was very fearful, which I can't blame him. He went through quite a lot of trauma during his rehabilitation and during his time on the rehab side with us. So that was very understandable. However, here we're seeing he is on a scale. We had him trained where he would get up onto a scale on his own with prompting. He was trained to get on there. He was trained to station at different areas in the enclosure. And here he is comfortable on a scale eating with me in the enclosure with him, which at that time was quite an accomplishment. We did eventually get to the point where he would be calm in an enclosure and I could clean around him. He would be eating on his on this specific post here with people on our walkway, which is right in front of the enclosure, and he wasn't skittish, he wasn't scared. So we did make a lot of progress with him, but unfortunately he did have some injuries that just made his quality of life worse pretty quickly over the years, and we did end up having to make a quality of life assessment for him. So I do miss him a lot, but he was one of my favorite birds to work with.
Sounds like you grow in bonds with the birds that you work with and the other animals. You want to go to the next slide, Rob, and we'll see who else is at the center? So what's the context of this picture, Jessica?
So this was one of 2 young nestling eagles that were brought to us by the state of Virginia, their Department of Wildlife Resources. The nest had actually fallen in a very public area. Their nest was right near a parking area at a state park. And because of the concern of how public it was and how many people there were going to be, and the nest itself had been destroyed, there wasn't going to be a lot of options for potentially making a new nest or re-nesting these guys up there. So they were brought to us. So we raised them from very wobbly, older nestlings, kind of younger fledglings, all the way up until they were fully flighted, eating on their own, fully capable adults, and then they were released back. I think it was down near Stafford, Virginia, that they were returned to. So they made a full recovery, grew up great, wanted nothing to do with us, which is exactly what we want. And these are just some pictures in our largest. We have a circular flight cage on our property so that they can have full continuous flight, and that kind of helps us evaluate their flight ability, but also increase their flight fitness before being released.
What a great rehabilitation story. Let's go to the next one. And here he is again. Is this the same eagle?
This is the same eagle, yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like you have someone in your arms there.
Yeah, so part of my job, a very small part, is actually going out on rescues when the animals that are down pose a greater threat to injury to the finder. In this case, this is an adult bald eagle that was found down on a horse farm. So obviously we don't want to advise people to try to contain dangerous animals on their own if possible. Sometimes there are easier ways to do it where they don't have to come in contact with the animal at all. But in this case, where the animal was located, the finder didn't have any sort of resources or any sort of materials that would keep them safe. So we came out. I had our grounds and maintenance manager. He came with me to assist and get some pictures if we could. So here you can see I've got eagle gauntlets on, a towel over the eagle, and I am trying to adjust and get his legs underneath the towel. So while most raptors were always worried about their talons being the dangerous part, eagles are very large compared to me. Most of them, their body is almost my entire torso, and they are not shy about trying to bite as well. So we always try to keep their faces covered. Number one, that helps keep them a little bit calmer, but also prevents them from being able to reach up and try to bite us if we are trying to contain them and get them under restraint.
We'll go to the next one now. So what's on that?
So this was
head?
another eagle. Yeah, so this is another eagle. So you can see he's got what we call a hood on. So this is really helpful if we don't want something bulky like a towel or a blanket over their head. We can just slip this right over their head. It keeps their eyes dark. And as for most birds, if you cover their vision, they can't see anything, it's dark. They very much relax. They, are no longer thrashing as much. They're no longer as stressed because they're not getting all of that visual stimulation of the environment. And you have to think about animals, wildlife coming into rehabilitation is very much like a person being abducted by aliens, right? They're coming into this environment that they have no understanding of. It's very bright. There's a lot of stimulation happening. They don't understand that we're trying to help them. So by reducing as much of that information that they are being bombarded with can really help in keeping them calm, which makes our evaluation of them much easier and a lot faster as well. So the hood, it fits snugly. We have multiple sizes of hoods for various species of birds, from eagles all the way down to sharp-shinned hawks. So that way we can easily fit them over that and then be able to work freely around their entire body.
Love that analogy of the alien abduction. That really makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that'll resonate with folks. I think we've got a couple more awesome photos from your work we'll cycle through.
So this is just another eagle that we actually ended up, I had to come in after hours. This was when I only lived like 10 minutes away from the center. And this is our director of our hospital services, Dr. Jen Riley, on the left-hand side. So she's one of our full-time vets. And we both lived very close. I think a sheriff had found a bald eagle that was down right in our county. And it was like 7:30 or something at night. And they needed somewhere to take this bird. And we said, okay, we'll be in 10 minutes. We'll meet you there. So that way that bird, we do have a drop-off box for people who find wildlife after hours. We're normally at the center from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. at this time of year. But in case somebody can't get to us until a little bit after or can only drop off before, that is an option. But we didn't want this bird, from hearing about its injuries and hearing what had happened, we didn't want him sitting overnight without pain medication or, assessing him and making sure that we can get him comfortable for the night.
So what radius do you travel in your area for these kind of rescue operations when necessary?
So we try not to go very far. There are some other options. Really great resources in our area are local animal control officers. There's quite a few counties like Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Prince William County, who are all very versed and skilled in capturing and restraining wildlife. So if we can generally refer people to those resources, that saves us a lot of time and effort. Because for me to leave the facility and go and do a rescue, that means that I am now leaving animals that are in our care that could be, requiring multiple feeds during a day. We do have volunteers and we do have interns, but having a staff member leave is quite a large responsibility that is now open until I return. So I have traveled up to 45 minutes away. Again, depending on the species, if it's a dangerous species or if it's in a situation that really requires more specialized work, like great horned owl stuck in barbed wire or a bald eagle on the side of a road in a ditch. Those are things that we don't want to advise people to risk themselves, either both risking themselves by getting hit by a car or, being challenged by these birds, but also making sure that we're not putting those animals at risk. If somebody tries to just rip something off of barbed wire, it's generally going to cause a lot more trauma than if we can go out and actually work the bird off of the barbed wire or trim the barbed wire itself. I've driven 30 minutes to help our state do confiscations for animals before. So we do aid our wildlife officers and our conservation police officers quite a bit. But generally we try to keep it within county so that we don't have to drive as far and so we're not taking as much time away from the facility.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks for telling us a little bit more about that. And Rob, I think there's one more picture I really want to share. If you could go back to the slides. It's a unexpected visitor. We've been talking a lot about eagles and raptors, but we have a photo that you shared with us of a sedated, a different kind of animal. There's a release photo. There we go. I want to hear this story, if you can tell me a little bit about this one.
So this beaver was found just wandering in a park on a trail away from water. There were obvious puncture wounds on the back end, but generally adult beavers are not going to be very welcoming of people, and they were letting him, people were walking right up to him. He was not running away. And this was like a solid 20, 25 pound beaver. So that was really fun. In this photo, we are anesthetizing him with anesthesia to get him fully under anesthesia, get him fully sedated so that we could easily do an exam, because as you can see, he's quite large. Trying to manipulate him would be very difficult with him awake. But also it's for the animal's stress as well. If he's got a broken bone or he's got painful injuries, we don't want to be manipulating those things while they're awake, because again, they have no idea. They think we're predators. They're stressed out. So if we can do that while they're sedated, it's going to be a lot easier both for us and for them. So this guy did end up recovering and being able to be released back, and we had some good release photos of him.
And I'm happy to hear that. I love beavers, so this one really struck me. Before we talk through any of your other great images you shared, I wanted to check in with Randy and see if we had any questions from the audience.
We do have a couple here, Megan and Jessica. Brittany's asking, do they educate hunters against lead ammunition in order to obtain their license? And I think she means the state. It's usually the state Department of Natural Resources or Fish and Game or whatever it's called in your particular state. So do you know about Virginia, Brittany? Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica, do you know what they do in Virginia as far as education goes?
As far as I know, for like hunter permits and hunter courses, I don't believe that there is much education for that. We had the Department of Wildlife Resources come to one of our continuing education conferences in Waynesboro at the Wildlife Center of Virginia, like 4 or 5 years ago. And they were talking about potentially starting an initiative to start educating people about it. But they said that it was going to likely be quite a few years before they could start rolling that out. And that was mostly going to be geared towards state-owned lands, where they might start prohibiting use of lead ammunition in those areas. But as far as I know, there's really not much education being put out from the state itself.
Well, it's a great idea, and hopefully they will, or they should, and they will before too long. But it is up to the states to do that. The other question here was, do you guys have many birds or other animals that have hit power lines or other structures, cell phone towers, other kind of things that birds might hit?
So the education, so the resident eagle that we talked about a little bit earlier, Jefferson, he was a suspected power line strike. Nobody had seen it, but that's just the story that he came in with. We have had a few birds come in with electrocutions, but it's very minimal. It's maybe 2 a year, if that. And normally it's very obvious because there's not normally a ton of other trauma involved, but we have an entry point of where they've touched something electrical, whether it's a transformer or a power, and then you have an exit wound, whether it's either out of their foot or the other wing, and it's normally singed at both areas. It can be really blackened and crusted over, and generally electrocutions do not go very well. That whatever current that's running through them tends to do a lot of damage internally that we can't really do much except provide supportive care and just monitor how they're doing. But we know it happens every now and again, but it doesn't sound like this is as large of an issue as we get compared to, for example, lead poisoning, car strikes, window strikes, and things like that.
I had a question for you, Jessica, on the lead poisoning. What are the typical visible symptoms of lead poisoning?
So something that you had mentioned earlier in the program, where people were concerned about the adult male killing the chicks, which that's also crazy. I've never heard of that before. But talking about, the drooping head. So that's normally a sign you've got an eagle that just is down, their head's low, they're really not reactive. In more severe cases, you're going to see respiratory distress. The bird is breathing very rapidly or very hard. They may even start having seizures at a certain point. So that's normally really far in when you've got a lot of neurologic damage from the lead poisoning. But most of the time, there's not much else. We do make it a point that for all of our raptors that come in, we're taking blood so that we can run it through our lead tester to make sure that nobody has lead or just low levels of lead. In cases where birds do have high levels of lead or at least treatable levels of lead in their blood, we'll also take x-rays just to make sure there aren't any fragments still in their gastrointestinal tract. Because if there are, that is now something else that we need to work to flush that out of their system as quick as possible, because that's just going to continue to poison them until they've processed it.
No, there is a comment here about this person's from Vancouver, Canada, and it says they have problems out there with birds hitting power lines, not necessarily getting electrocuted always, but hitting the lines or the guy wires or cell phone towers. Any obstruction like that is a problem. I know in some places like Florida, where they do have a lot of bald eagles, a lot of power lines, they will put insulated coverings over the hot lines or the energized lines to protect bald eagles. But that's usually only done in areas where they have a lot of both power lines and the big birds.
Was that it for audience questions, Randy?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, I have one more question for you, Jessica. So it's amazing work that you're doing at the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center, and I want to ask if you can share with our audience how they can keep up to date with what you all are doing.
Yeah, so we are on pretty much all social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. For the most part, Facebook and Instagram are kind of our most commonly used ones. We're posting at least once a day of interesting cases that we have going on, or every now and again, just some cute photos. Right now is baby season, so we've got a lot of cute babies in care, but most of them come with some sort of educational story, some ways that we can help mitigate making these animals come into care to begin with. So finding us at any of those social media sites, just Blue Ridge Wildlife Center will pop up, and you guys can keep in touch with us that way.
Well, I'll be sure to give you a follow, and I hope some of our visitors do too. So that's it for our program today. We want to reach out and thank everybody viewing, all of our viewers new and old, as well as our sponsors, of course, the Friends of NCTC and the Outdoor Channel, as well as those NCTC staff here in the room supporting this broadcast today. To you, Randy. And it's really been a pleasure talking to you, to our guests, Katie Fallon and Jessica.
Yeah, ditto that. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And that'll wrap up our season for this year, but we're going to leave the cameras on. As I mentioned, we've got to take them down for a couple of days to do some maintenance and fix the power panel issue that we have. But then we're going to put them back up. So keep an eye on them. It's always interesting to see what kind of visitors we're going to get, throughout the summer. And then in the fall, the adults will start their ritual again, bringing sticks in, rebuilding the nest, usually mating in January, laying eggs in February, and hopefully seeing them hatch in March again. So once again, Megan, thank you very much. To our guests, Jessica and Katie, thanks for joining us. Thanks to you all, and we'll see you back on the Eagle Cam online. Take care.